Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
History Makers with Matt Prater.
Coming off of drugs, you're going to have emotional problems, but I kept chasing after God.
And he's using this vehicle to bring people out of that dark into the light.
And I went forward and I knelt at the front, and it was a radical conversion experience.
And that's where the big change happened, and that's where we decided we're going to use our music for God, we're going to change our songs.
When I was about 25-year-old, I was busted and into jail, and it was there that I came to the Lord.
History Makers with Matt Prater.
Hi and welcome to History Makers. I'm Matt Prater. Today our guest host is Grace Buckman.
I'm Grace Buckman, and today we're chatting with Enoch Lavender, the director of Olive Tree Ministries, an end-time prophetic teaching ministry. He's got a powerful ministry doing the Lord's work and has a real heart for China and Israel, which we'll chat more about today. Very excited to hear more about your story today, Enoch, so welcome to History Makers.
Thank you, Grace. Excited to be here.
Enoch, first of all, can you tell me a little bit about where you were born and raised?
Born in Australia, raised in Norway, lived in China. So I've had a bit of a background of all kinds of cultures coming together, and then God implanted in me a heart for Israel. So I've had quite a journey through different cultures.
Yeah, that's incredible. I imagine you would have seen very different things, especially in how they do their churches or how they just are with cultures and family. So yeah, very excited to hear more about that today. But in terms of your faith, so did you grow up in a Christian home, or was that something you came to later on in life?
Family was a Christian home, yes, and my first memory is when I was 3.5 years old, talking to my mum, and ended up having a conversation where she led me in a prayer to ask Jesus into my heart. Down the track, I had times of recommitment as a teenager, as a young adult, finding my feet, but that was my earliest memory, and I remember as a child praying and discovering that God heard and answered my prayers. So that was special, even as a little boy.
Yeah, beautiful. I love the story of people growing up in a Christian home and just seeing, even though there can be those times of recommitment, just the beautiful long faith journey that we have with God. So yeah, it's incredible. And obviously at some point you started to move more into ministry. What did that look like for you?
So I studied IT, so I did computer work, but I also began to go to Bible college, and that was my passion, to learn more in this area, to serve the Lord. My plan was to serve him in China, and while I was there, we really felt the Lord redirect our path, and gradually we got connected with a Messianic congregation, which is a congregation of Jews who believe in Jesus. And that was very new to me. I'd been to Bible college, I'd been in many churches, learned a lot about the Christian faith, but getting this angle and a completely different perspective on the Bible really helped me, in a sense, put my the glasses on that they would have had in the first century. How did they understand the words of Jesus compared to me as a 20th or 21st century Aussie trying to understand it from my perspective?
Yeah, it's very different, isn't it? Just growing up in the Western church and culture, you don't have the same rich traditions and hearing about the different feasts. And I would personally love to be able to go and experience that as well. So you've got a heart for China as well. How did that come with your heart for Israel? Was it China and then it started happening with Israel? What did that look like for you as well?
My mum had a missionary call to China, and so we travelled there as a family many times growing up. I've been there 7 times, 2 to 3 months at a time. And it was really special to be a missionary kid. Gives you a different perspective. You are encountering a different culture, different way of life. You understand it's difficult for Christians in countries like that. And you begin to understand and appreciate a different way of thinking. But I knew that my passion for China was not something I could insist others should share with me. It was mine. Many other Christians did not have that passion. However, as I began to get connected in with the Jewish side of things, I began to discover things here that I thought was just for the Jews, but turned out to be for all of us as Christians. So it became something of a passion then to share that with the wider body of Messiah, the truths I began to glean from that perspective.
Were there any key things of that you could see that was for everyone, not just the Jewish people of the time? That is something that you could share with us as well?
Absolutely. So we read a story of Jesus' final days with the disciples, and we read about how he went into the temple and he cleaned out the temple. He got rid of all the people who were selling and trading there. But in the context, what's happening for the Jewish people everywhere around him is they are all cleaning their houses of leaven. They need to get leaven out of their houses because they're getting ready for Passover, and leaven represents sin. And Jesus goes to his house, God's house, the temple. He cleans it out of those selling and trading, because this is my house, a house of prayer. So it's a very significant understanding what is going on in the culture at that time.
One thing I love about the Bible is there's so much you can get just reading it from a surface level, but the more you go in, the more you understand the culture, the history, the tradition. It is so rich, and I love that you will never just be able to stop learning the beautiful and just seeing Jesus all throughout that, and how he goes from, you know, even the more as you read the Old Testament, the more you just see the beauty of Jesus and the New Testament as well. And so I know your ministry now, of course, you focus a lot on the end time prophetic teaching ministry. Did you find that came from your heart from Israel, or was that just something that you journeyed onto later on in life?
So we got connected with a lady in Melbourne called Pat Ramsey. She was heading up a ministry called Shalom Israel. The goal of that was to bring teaching to churches about the Jewish background of our faith, but also where we are at in history. And so she gave me loads and loads and loads of resources. She had first-hand experiences of being part of the modern miracle of Israel. And she said, hey, you need to read this book. You need to listen to this documentary. And from there, I began to see that we are in a very unique time in history. Yes, there's been Christians throughout the ages waiting for, longing for the return of Jesus. But as I began to study Bible prophecy, I began to realize that we are in a time when these prophecies and promises are coming to pass in an unprecedented way. So 100 years ago, 200 years ago, I don't believe Jesus could have come back. But now the stage is being set with so many players, with the tensions in the Middle East that's dominating our headlines. All this is setting the stage for his return. And that means that we need to live ready. We need to live prepared for that day. And so that has really changed my life, beginning to understand what is going on from a Bible perspective.
And I know you mentioned even through a lot of the time with what is going on in the Middle East, your family was able to do a trip over to Israel. Can you tell me a bit more about that experience, what you were doing, and what that was like for your kids as well?
Yeah, so we had pre-booked a trip to Israel, flying via Jordan. When the war broke out, we obviously had to pray, what do we do? And we realized that because our flights were to Jordan, they weren't going to be cancelled, and there were no refunds on offer. And the more we prayed about it, we just felt this tremendous sense of peace. We were going to go and stay in Jerusalem, which was a place where internal refugees within Israel are flocking to Jerusalem and other places like that. And we knew there was a time of need. It's one thing to go and visit someone when they're happy and they're joyful and everything's going fine. It's another thing to go and visit them in their hour of need, in a time of great sadness and shock for the nation. And so we felt this is a time to go, even as a family with young kids, because here we had Hamas tearing families apart. And we came as Christians, bringing our family, believing and praying that God is going to restore families in this place. One of the amazing things that happened for us was, so our twins, they're 4 years old. So on their birthday in Israel, we went to the Western Wall. We went and prayed. And as we left, our 4-year-old girl noticed a poster, a missing person poster of one of the hostages who's in Gaza. And this was a 3-year-old girl. So she began to ask, Daddy, who is this? What's this about? So we began to tell the story of this little girl and others like her taken to Gaza. And she asked many, many questions, and so we spent time praying together for this girl. And after that, for the rest of our stay, she kept asking about that girl. And the last day we were in Israel, we got the news. That girl was released. That girl we had been praying for was released from captivity. A 3-year-old girl called Yahel Shoham was released with her older sister and her mummy. And what a moment, because really, what's the hope? When someone's taken captive into a situation like that, really, you don't know what's going to happen. But for our little girl, this was an answer to prayer. You know, it's an enormous situation. It's a huge conflict, a lot happening. But for us, it became very personal and focused on one little girl and her family in the midst of all this.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what I love about that story is that it was your beautiful little 4-year-old girl who was able to see that, to pray, and to really have that on her heart at an early age. And so often we think, oh, well, we'll leave it up to all the adults to only be the ones to pray or the only ones that God can speak to. But it's so beautiful that at that age, that is something that God was able to speak and put on your heart of your daughter. She was able to pray, bring it to you, and just to see that come to fruition in the end as well is beautiful. So I imagine it would have been incredible for your children and for you as well. I imagine, just like you said, being in that space with so much trauma and hurt and pain. What was it looking like on the day-to-day there for you?
It was remarkably peaceful. So we had no rocket sirens throughout our stay there. The main difference was that there were less tourists around and a number of tourist attractions were closed. But we had many great conversations with people, and actually just as we arrived, so we landed in Jordan, we crossed over the border from Jordan to Israel, and that is an arduous ordeal. It took 3 hours of waiting around in a hot, sticky place, dirty, dusty, flies everywhere. The kids hated it. They were petrified with the flies, panicking. Then we finally get across the border, and our little one, who's almost 2 years old, begins to sing. She hasn't been singing for quite a while. She begins to sing. As we're in a taxi heading up to Jerusalem, she sings, "The Lord bless you and keep you." And she sings the blessing, the Aaronic blessing over the people. And I said, this is why we're here. We're here to sing and speak God's blessing over the people in a difficult time. So many were encouraged to see us as a family, and we had many great conversations with people, Jewish and Christian.
Yeah, and I love just the beauty of in times like that. And I know we'll have a lot more times like this, whether it's war or just, I guess, countries coming against each other in the future. But there's the beauty of Christians being able to band together and have that commonality of Jesus and being able to pray for each other, fellowship with each other. And it's just so incredible that your children were able to experience that at such a young age as well.
Yeah, this is the time, absolutely, to minister as a family and to do this as a family, to show God's love as a family.
I have heard many, many incredible stories, and even just for children being able to experience that at such a young age as well, whether it's their parents are missionaries or just being able to go out and see that. I think it really is captivating for children to see the power of the church and the gospel and God. So I know you mentioned that you've got a new book as well, The Jubilee. Can you tell me a little bit about your book as well, what that journey looked like, and how the Lord put that on your heart too?
This year we've received an inheritance, and so we've been for many years dreaming to have our own house, and God supernaturally opened up the doors for us. 2 sets of inheritances came through at the same time, and in the middle of all this happening, the Lord was putting on my heart a topic of Jubilee, and as I began to study it, I realized it related to topics I've been preaching on from the very first message I shared 10, 15 years ago, a theme that there's coming a time when God will restore all things. Peter described Jesus' return, that he's coming at the time of the restoration of all things. And this was a phrase that was known in the Jewish world. It had its own meaning. And it was something that his listeners would have understood. But for us, the end times often has been portrayed as simply a really dark time of trouble. And yes, it is. We have got words of warning about those days, but we have missed this aspect of restoration, that when Jesus comes, firstly, he's going to rule and reign in Jerusalem. The angel Gabriel said he will sit upon the throne of his father David. But as he does, he's going to begin to fulfill the promises given. So for Israel, there's a kingdom they've never had. There's going to be a rule of peace on earth that has never been. God's presence is going to be among us in a way that we have never experienced and we've been longing for. The dead will be raised again. That is restoration. We weep the loss of a loved one, but there is a message of hope, and a hope of restoration to actually physically meet someone again in the flesh here on earth in Jesus' reign. In our family, we went through a miscarriage, and it was really, really hard for my wife and I, and we were saddened by what happened. But a challenge in that was that we had a prophetic word about this little girl. Her name was supposed to be Joy. And I said, God, what joy is this? She's gone. As I began to study this topic, I realized that her name, her destiny, will be fulfilled in that day, because she will rise from the dead physically, and I will be able to embrace her physically. And that will be a moment of great joy. When her name will be fulfilled, she will be known as Joy. And so this aspect of resurrection, restoration, joy, and anticipation of something so wonderful to come that far outweighs and far overshadows the dark times, the short dark times of the end times, makes it all worth it, gives us a hope. That's what this book is all about. I encourage our listeners to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're exactly right. So often we'll skip over the whole book of Revelation just out of fear, but ultimately it's the revelation of Jesus. And the more that we can see, you're right, like the qualities of redemption and restoration and resurrection, it is just such a joy. And you're right, in the whole time of our time on earth, it is such a small blip. And while there will be, of course, challenges in that time, it'll be just the beauty and seeing our Saviour come back, come home. So yeah, I love that that's a big focus of the book and a part of your ministry as well, and sharing the beauty and redemption of that too. And just tell me a little bit more about, if people want to see more of your ministry, Olive Tree Ministries as well, where can they also find that, or more about you?
On the one hand, they can go to YouTube and do a search for Enoch Lavender. On the other hand, they can find our website is olivetreeministries.org.au. And there we've got a range of teaching articles, we've got a free newsletter, we've got some resources available for sale, we've got videos, free teaching videos. So yeah, please come and check us out and explore with us the Jewish background of our faith as we seek to be ready for Jesus coming, and what that means for us today as believers.
Well, it's so awesome. I love seeing so many ministries just in all the different ways and places that God has us just coming together to all point back to Jesus. So very excited to see more about your ministry and how God uses it as well. But Enoch, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on History Makers today. I reckon you're a history maker, and so good to see what God is doing in your life. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Grace. It's been amazing.
If you'd like to hear this conversation again, listen online anytime at historymakersradio.com. There you'll also find links to all of our social media channels, and you can subscribe to our iTunes podcast. History Makers is a faith-based ministry, and we want to thank everyone for their generous support. If you've got a suggestion of anyone we should interview, send us an email, info@historymakersradio.com. God bless. I'm Matt Prater, and my challenge to you now is to go and make history.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.